Hello, my fabulous Scrappy friends. It is Jess here from the Scrappy Sisters, and thank you for joining me for a Confessions of a Paper Addict design team layout. So for this layout, I'm starting off by using some gesso and a dry paintbrush. I believe this is literally called dry brushing. It is when you take your dry paintbrush and you just try and spread on your paint or your ink of whatever you're using. And the idea is that it's kind of streaky, and it doesn't smooth very well, and it kind of has that rough kind of paintbrushy textured look to it. Super technical term there, but I believe that is the concept of how it works. I'm trying to spread mine around a little bit. Of course, it doesn't spread that well because the brush is so dry, but I didn't want a thick amount of gesso. I just really wanted to lighten up those diamonds in the background so that my cut file would pop just that little bit more off the page. So that is literally all I am doing, just to lighten up that background. You can hardly see it by the time this whole layout is complete, but it's just enough to make sure that that cut file doesn't get lost in amongst the pattern paper in the background. I'm going to glue my cut file flat to the page today. I often like to pop them up on foam, but today I decided I would glue it flat and I would pop up my photos instead, as opposed to as well. If you watch my channel, you will know that I often pop up my cut files and my photos, but today I'm just going to focus on popping up my photos. Now, these photos are quite old. They're from 2013, and they're quite dark, and camera phones back in 2013 just weren't quite what they are today, and so the quality is not that fabulous either, but I could not let this party go without documenting it. So I'm just making the best of the photos that I've got. I've decided to focus on some really light and bright colors in my cut file and in my background paper because the photos themselves are just so dark. This is a surprise birthday party that I planned for my husband. It was before we had kids back in 2013, so I actually went to see my grandma, who lives about 2 hours away. My mum was there, and while she was there, we made a cake. On my drive home to Melbourne, I stopped and I dropped my cake off at the place, at the venue that we are having his party, without him knowing. Obviously, the whole thing is a surprise. And then, I took him out for dinner on the pretext that it was just him and I having dinner on the night of his party, and then all of his friends were there. So he did guess probably about 10-15 minutes before the party started. Once we were in the city, he'd started to get a bit suspicious. But otherwise, the surprise had worked, and I was not unhappy that he'd guessed about 10 minutes before. One of those people that doesn't particularly love surprises, likes to know what's happening and to be sort of, organised and in control. So I think knowing that there'd be other people there, he didn't know who, of course, but knowing that there'd be other people there just a little bit in advance didn't worry him. So a nice little surprise. He obviously had no clue that I'd gone to so much trouble with the cake and who I'd invited and all of those things as well. He wasn't going to celebrate this birthday. It was one of those special milestone birthdays, let's put it like that, and he wanted to just forget it was happening. So I didn't think he should forget it was happening. So quite happy to have just this little party, not too many people there, and just to acknowledge that it did actually exist. Anyway, you can see that I am busy popping on some embellishments. I strategically put that make a wish there over my hand. I'm pointing at something. Who knows? It's like I'm telling him where to blow out the candles. Pretty sure he knows how to do that, Jess. So I just covered my finger up with that Make-A-Wish embellishment, that super cute balloon with the sunglasses on. I kind of have gone with 4 embellishment clusters as opposed to the visual triangle of 3. Wasn't really intentional. I just was putting things where I liked them, and it worked out luckily for me with this layout. Just popping that big green Celebrate across the middle. I really wanted that green just to tie in the different coloured greens from the cake. I was thinking I would put the day, as in how old he turned onto this layout, but I didn't really have thickers that I thought would work well. I didn't have nice gold sparkly thickers that I thought would work well. I didn't have any green ones that would match in well. So I'll just leave that to the journaling where I explain what happened and how old he was then. I think that will cut it. That will be fine. He'd probably rather that anyway, as opposed to every time we open the page, we've got this big number right in the middle of the page. So, and this layout is almost finished now. I will go ahead and use those little spots that came with the collection. This is Oh Happy Day from Pebbles. I really wasn't sure about whether I should buy this or not because it's quite a cutesy collection, which I love, but I was worried that it's quite not a large collection. All collections are this big, but I was worried that I might get a little bit bored of all of my birthday layouts being with the exact same collection all the time, but I'm not yet. I'm really enjoying it. I think it works well for adults and children. Like I've done layouts of my boys and I've done this layout of my husband. So I think it's working really well. I'm happy that I bought it. I definitely have a lot more layouts I can do. I'll be using this collection until I'm 100, I think, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I won't probably use it every single birthday for forever, but at the moment it's the layout I'm going to do. The collection I'm going to use. Sorry, that didn't make sense. Watching what I'm doing here, you might wonder why I trimmed my paper down later. I hadn't 100% decided when I started this layout if I was going to trim it down, and about maybe 2 minutes in, I decided that yes, I really did want to trim it down. So I made sure I stuck away from the edges, but finished off the layout first. I then went and distressed the edges, as you saw, with my scissors. You do need to be careful if you're using scissors. You don't want to cut yourself, but I was being a bit lazy and didn't want to get my distress tool out, so I just roughed it up with my scissors, adding a little bit of texture and a little bit of interest around the page. The mat there is a yellow piece of 12 by 12, but it's quite a thin piece of paper, which is okay when you're using it as a mat because you don't really need the weight behind it as you're going to do 2 layers. I then finished it off with a few gold splatters and I'm calling this one done. I'm really happy with the way it all came together. I think it is super cute and super fun and a really nice way to remember the celebration of my husband's birthday. I hope you have enjoyed watching it and I cannot wait to see you all again next time. Thanks everyone.